If you're watching this video, it's because you understand that in fantasy football, if you get first, you're last. Today's video is all about buying the players, trading for the players that are going to win you a fantasy football championship. Now, if you remember last year in the fantasy playoffs, Jonathan Taylor, almost 26 points per game. Tajay Spears, over 21 points per game. Amir Abdullah, 19. I won a championship with Amir Abdullah as my starting running back. Brian Thomas, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Amon-Ra, Malik Neighbors. These guys dominated in the fantasy playoffs last year, and they were the reason a lot of you guys probably came home with a championship. Well, that's the entire goal of today's video. These are the players you should be buying. They should be on your team if you want to go out there and win the whole damn thing, all right? Let's start off with the running back position, and we will have time codes for every single position here. I have a buy at every spot. Now, starting with running backs, let's go to Chase Brown. Now, Chase Brown ended up retaining his workhorse status last Sunday. You can see his snap share in 2025, 73, 70, 55, 74, 53, 62s, and then last week got up to 95.4%. Now, obviously, a lot of that had to do with the fact that Samaje Perine had the ankle injury on that first drive, but ended up last week with 95% of the snaps, almost 80% of the rushing opportunities, 31% target share. I mean, Joe Flacco was targeting him like there is no tomorrow. 14 targets in that game against Chicago. He goes on the bye this week. So if you are in a league where there's a team that desperately needs to win to make the playoffs and they have Chase Brown, now is your time to absolutely pounce on that opportunity to get Chase Brown for the playoff run. And yes, obviously Chase Brown being the dominant running back in this backfield is helpful, but how about the schedule? Because in week 15, he faced the Baltimore Ravens. Smash matchup. In week 16, everybody's favorite matchup in fantasy football, the Miami Dolphins. Then in week 17, he faces the Cardinals, which are a neutral matchup, but man, those first two matchups are absolutely juicy. They could be the reason you're actually in the fantasy finals there in week number 17. So do not be afraid to go out there and buy some Chase Brown. He looks like he's set to redeem every single person who spent a second-round pick on him in the fantasy playoffs. All right, another buy. This one's going to be a little bit more difficult. All right, you're going to have to pay a premium, but that is Devon Achane. Now, Devon Achane, obviously RB3 through the year. So, I mean, this isn't going to be a cheap buy. I think we can all recognize that, right? However, if you're willing to pay the premium on the RB3 in fantasy football, then it is good to note that his fantasy football playoff schedule is fantastic. He gets Pittsburgh in week 15, and then in week 16, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are probably, I'm not going to say probably, they are the best matchup in fantasy football right now. I know he's already one of the better players in fantasy football, but he could be the top scorer in all of fantasy football in week 16. Guys, we just saw Kyle Monangai have 176 rushing yards, okay? Go get some Devon Achane if you can. Okay, next player here, a more affordable option is Aaron Jones. Now, Aaron Jones did suffer an injury on Sunday to his shoulder. That's obviously difficult. Now, after the game, he told reporters that he was going to be all right. He wanted to be back onto the field. We've heard plenty of, guys say that in the past, and it hasn't really been the case. According to head coach O'Connell, they're saying that the evaluations are pretty positive for his injury, and the belief is that it's minor and he'll be able to play this week. Regardless, you can use that injury. I guarantee you the Aaron Jones owners are thinking about this. You can use that injury to say, hey, this guy's always injured. He just had another injury. Why not trade him away, right? And I think he's in a great position to go out there and dominate. Before he went down with the injury, he was dominating snap share, opportunity share. He looked fantastic, averaging over 8.5 yards per carry against a really tough Lions defense. And then you look at the playoff schedule for the Vikings, right? You've got Dallas in week 15, beautiful. You got the Giants in week 16, beautiful. And yes, it is a bad matchup against Detroit in week 17, but we just saw him against Detroit look fantastic. JJ McCarthy looks competent. Go get you some Aaron Jones. Okay, the next name is another very affordable name. That is either Ramondre Stevenson or Travion Henderson. They're both great options if you're looking for guys that have great schedules in the fantasy playoffs. Maybe you're a dominant team, but your RB2 spot is just weak and you need someone to just fill that spot to be a competent name. That's what you can do with Stevenson and Travion Henderson. Now, don't forget, Stevenson was dominating snap share before he went down with the injury. 72% of the snaps in week 6, 75, 74% of the snaps, again, the weeks before he went down with the injury. And here's the best news about their upcoming schedule. Baltimore in week 16, and then the Jets in week 17. That is one of the better schedules in the fantasy football playoffs. You can go by Travion Henderson if you believe there is a second-year breakout for the young, talented rookie as well. Whoever's cheaper, go out and get them, and they can be, you know, that kind of Band-Aid for your fantasy football rosters. I know a lot of us are dealing with injuries. I actually just traded for Ramondre Stevenson in the Flock League, sending away Alvin Kamara. So go and look how cheap he can be in your leagues as well. Okay, let's move on to Josh Jacobs, another trade idea. This guy's going to cost more than the average player right now. But if you look at the schedule in the fantasy playoffs for Josh Jacobs, I'm specifically looking at week 16. Denver and Chicago are neutral matchups. I actually really like Chicago in week 16. But if you look at week 17, we've got the Baltimore Ravens, one of the better matchups for your fantasy running backs. So when everything is on the line, when all the marbles are on the line in week 17 and you got a chance to earn some money, Josh Jacobs is probably the running back that you want to be rostering in that week. So one of the best features on the Flock site, which is completely free, is the My Teams feature. You can access that when you use my promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, and you create a free account on the site. Go check it out. It shows expert consensus rankings, latest trades, a lot of really helpful features that you don't even have to spend a dime on. Check that out with the pinned comment. All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position, starting off with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Now, we did hear during the bye week for the Lions, offensive coordinator John Morton came out and said, look, I failed Jameson Williams. We need to get him more involved, right? There was plenty of that going around this week. And then obviously we saw Jameson Williams come into this game after putting up a goose egg on week 7 and had 16.6 fantasy points, got targeted down the field, made the really impressive play down the sideline where he got the touchdown. Now, Isaiah Rodgers actually tweeted out and said that is a full extension. Doesn't matter. The points still count. The point is they want to get him more involved, and they showed already that they're willing to get him more involved. So both of these guys are great buy lows. Well, Amon-Ra's not a buy low, but Jameson is. Buy Amon-Ra at his price. In week 15, the Rams. That's going to be a competitive game back and forth, no doubt. Pittsburgh in week 16, one of the better matchups. And then Minnesota in week 17, you just saw Jameson Williams score a touchdown against that team. So again, if you want to go the superstar route with Amon-Ra, perfect. If you want to go the flex route with Jameson, both are fine buys. All right, the second group that I think you should go out and buy here is Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Now, obviously, there was a lot of concern from the fantasy community about what exactly would JJ McCarthy mean for this wide receiver group, right? In week 9 versus Detroit, well, he had 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown as well, completed just over 50% of his passes, so you want to see that number go up. But for Justin Jefferson, he got into the end zone. We love to see that. Almost 17 PPR points, 9 targets. For Jordan Addison, definitely a less involved game, but to be fair, no one anticipated the Vikings being up in this game and ultimately kind of manhandling the Lions defense. I don't think anyone really anticipated that, so Addison was not as needed. Here's the great news. In the first week of the fantasy playoffs, they get the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, I just lost Jaden Daniels. And I'm thinking to myself, do I pick up JJ McCarthy in the Flock League so I have him against the Dallas Cowboys in week 15? That sounds like the perfect matchup for me. But great matchup against the Cowboys. Then you get the Giants, which is a plus matchup. And then the Lions again in week 17. Great matchup for these guys when it matters the most. Okay, the next receiver I think you should go out and really heavily consider is Jalen Waddle. Now, Jalen Waddle has been really good since Tyreek Hill went down with that injury. From week 5 onwards, we're talking about a guy that is a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football. Hasn't been really through the touchdowns, but the volume has been there. You know, they've already fired their GM in Miami. I was concerned that the head coach might follow, but all reports from the team is that Mike McDaniel is going to retain his job, which means that we can rely on Tua, we can rely on Waddle, we can rely on Achane. That is definitely something that we love to hear, because in the fantasy football playoffs, you can see the Miami Dolphins have Pittsburgh in week 1, one of the best matchups for your receivers. Then Cincinnati, that should be a barn burner. Then Tampa Bay. Name a single matchup where you don't anticipate the Miami Dolphins throwing in a barn burner type of scenario. Go get you some Jalen Waddle. And here is a currently injured player. He might be back this week that you can go buy low as well. How about Mr. Slick Ricky Pearsall? Now, if you remember, before he went down with this injury, he was averaging well over 75 yards per game. In 2 out of his 4 games, he had over 100 receiving yards. Looked like he was a breakout of the year in this offense. Brock Purdy is getting a little bit healthier. Ricky Pearsall could be back this week. In the fantasy playoffs, they get Tennessee, Indianapolis, and Chicago. It's a great matchup for him. He should be far cheaper. Obviously, people are concerned because Jennings is coming back. Kendrick Bourne has been productive. At some point, we'll see Brandon Ayuk. George Kittle is now healthy. But if you can go by Ricky Pearsall, I believe he's going to be an integral part of their offense moving forward. Okay, look, if your championship is in week 18, this is a guy that you can start reliably each and every week as a safe floor. And in week 18 specifically, he has a very high upside. By the way, if you're playing week 18 championship, talk to your commissioner. You shouldn't be doing that. That just doesn't make any sense. You should put it a week before that. But he's been a very solid, reliable floor since week 6 onwards. Obviously, he had that big blow-up game against Dallas in week number 2. But if you look at specifically week 17, you will see the Giants play the Las Vegas Raiders. And plenty of wide receivers have been dominating against this defense each and every single week. So he is a cheap, affordable buy for anyone out there who's missing their last flex position. Okay, let's move on to the quarterback position. Now, this might be surprising to some of you guys, but a league-winning quarterback might be on your waiver wire right now because the player I'm about to tell you to go buy, I'm actually telling you to pick him up for free. He has a bye week this week. But if you just lost Jaden Daniels, like I did in the Flock League, or you lost, your starting quarterback this year, go pick up Joe Flacco. And if you can, pick up Joe Burrow and put him on your IR completely free. Joe Flacco, since he's joined this team, that is week 6 onwards, he hasn't had a single game under 22 points in a 4-point passing touchdown league. He's had plenty of games over 300 passing yards. I mean, just in week 9, 470 passing yards. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. I mean, if you look at the Bengals offense since Joe Flacco arrived, you can see they are number 1 in EPA per play. They are the best offense on an EPA basis. If you look at Joe Flacco, the most passing yards by a single quarterback in any game over the age of 40, Joe Flacco now has a record over the names like Tom Brady and Brett Favre. I mean, he's been absolutely fantastic this year, and you can start him each and every week. It's also a really good schedule in the playoffs, by the way, for the Bengal quarterbacks. They get Baltimore in week 15, then Miami in week 16, and week 17, they get the Arizona Cardinals. So you can pick up Joe Flacco, start him, and have him lead you to the playoffs. And then if Joe Burrow comes back from the injury, beautiful. A free player to go ahead and lead you to your fantasy football championships, Look, if some of your fantasy football teams are just completely destroyed by injuries this year, then what I've found to be helpful is to play some DFS contests. And week 8, I actually won the DFS contest on FastDraft, the Quick 6 Super Slam. Now you can create your own lineup. It's fairly simple. All you got to do is download the FastDraft app, use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50. And then you're going to get my week 10 rankings completely free. See if you can beat me in one of these contests, all right? Make your lineup unique. That's the key there, but you can check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have some fun. Okay, let's jump into the tight end position. I've got 3 tight ends for you that I think you can go buy right now. Okay, starting off with Sam Laporta, currently the tight end 7 in fantasy football. Now, if you look at the schedule in the playoffs, they get the Rams, which should be a barn burner, the Minnesota Vikings in week 17, but in week 16, the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is one of the best matchups in fantasy football for your fantasy tight ends. He's part of a high-powered offense. He's a little bit boom bust, but I think he's a great option if you don't have a solidified name. How about Tyler Warren coming off one of his worst games of the year, 7.6 fantasy points. He gets the Atlanta Falcons. That's not a good matchup. You can go out there and buy him. He also has his buy in week 11. So if you're set up and you can wait on that buy, he's a perfect guy to go out there and acquire at this moment. You can see in the fantasy football playoffs, they get the Seahawks, the Niners, and the Jags, all great matchups for tight ends. And of course, Tyler Warren, an important part of that Indianapolis Colts offense. How about George Kittle as well? Coming off the injury, it's been a little bit disappointing, right? His first game back, no receptions whatsoever, a goose egg. His second game back, a single touchdown. His third game back, under 7 fantasy points. If you can go buy him, now is the time to do that. In the playoffs, the Niners had the Colts and the Bears in week 16 and 17. And obviously at some point, we'll also get Brock Purdy back. But these are the guys that I imagine you'll see on most of the championship teams in 2025. So do everything you can to position yourself to be a part of those teams. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.